Everyone has known the story of the Magi who visited Jesus bringing gifts since childhood. A wonderful narrative, but if you stop and think about it, you'll see that this story is, at the very least, quite strange to be in the Bible. It involves Magi, a star that seems to move, exotic gifts, and dreams sent by God to pagans. All this gives the story an almost enigmatic air. But don't worry, in this video, we'll uncover many of these mysteries together and better understand what really happened during the Magi's visit to Jesus. The first mystery is, who were these Magi? The Magi mentioned in Matthew's account are not easy to identify precisely. Centuries before Jesus' birth, the word referred to a class of priests among the Medes, who were known for interpreting dreams. In the book of Daniel, these Magi appear as advisors in the Babylonian Empire. They were considered possessors of mystical knowledge that combined astrology, science, and religious practices, often connected to supernatural power. Over time, the term Magi came to include people involved with astrology, magic, and occult practices. This broader use ranged from scholars and astronomers to charlatans who used their skills to deceive or manipulate others. Thus, the meaning of the word diversified, and Magi came to be associated with both genuine wisdom and falsehood and deceit. The Magi who sought Jesus are presented as part of the first group. They were on a sincere quest for truth, trying to understand divine signs in the heavens and recognizing the birth of the Messiah. And for that, God helped them. The second mystery is, were these Magi kings? It's so common to hear the expression wise kings that many don't realize that the Bible never calls them kings. There is no mention of any royal title in the biblical text. This idea of them being kings probably emerged over the centuries, influenced by Old Testament passages that speak of kings coming to worship the Messiah. Isaiah 63:6 says, "And the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising. The multitude of camels shall cover thee, the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah. All they from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and incense, and they shall show forth the praises of the Lord." Notice how these prophetic texts have many similarities with Matthew's Gospel account. They speak of rulers bringing gifts, coming from the east, and bowing before the promised king. This may have led to the interpretation that the Magi were kings fulfilling these prophecies. This association was later reinforced by popular tradition, even though the biblical text does not provide many details about who they really were. Another mystery about the Magi is whether there were three of them. Once again, popular tradition leads us astray. The Bible does not say how many Magi visited Jesus. The theory that there were three men probably arose as a deduction based on the three types of gifts mentioned in Matthew 2:11: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. However, the biblical text does not specify their number or names. Two Magi could have given the same gift. It was only at the end of the 6th century that these wise men received names in Christian tradition. Melkon, later known as Melchior, Balthazar, and Gaspar. These names, however, have no basis in the biblical account and are part of later legends and traditions. And the gifts. Did they have any special meaning? In the culture of the ancient Near East, bringing gifts when approaching an authority was a common and important practice. Several biblical narratives describe this happening. These gifts were usually given as a sign of respect and, in many cases, were expected to be reciprocated. While this is not directly mentioned in Matthew's account, first-century readers would probably understand this gesture as a way to recognize Jesus as king and associate this visit with the fulfillment of the mission to bring the gospel to all nations. The gifts brought by the Magi, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, were valuable and significant at the time. Frankincense was a fragrant resin extracted from specific trees, and myrrh was a type of aromatic gum used as perfume, seasoning, and also for embalming bodies, as mentioned in John 19:39. Over the centuries, many have suggested that these gifts have a deep symbolic meaning. Gold symbolizes Christ's kingship, as it was a gift worthy of kings. Frankincense points to Jesus' divinity and his role as high priest, representing prayers rising to God, and myrrh, a substance used to embalm bodies, symbolizes the death he would face, anticipating the redemptive sacrifice on the cross. Others disagree, explaining that it's unlikely the Magi had this intention. They believe these gifts were valuable and practical, possibly even helping financially with the family's flight to Egypt, as they were very poor. But where did these Magi come from? It is likely that the Magi came from the east, possibly from Babylon, where there was a large Jewish community with significant influence. Another possibility is that they came from Persia or the Arabian desert. The idea that they came from Babylon makes sense, since the journey to Bethlehem seems to have taken quite some time, matching the greater distance from that location, among other reasons. These answers and possibilities are all very interesting, but one thing always intrigues us when we read this story: the fact that they were Magi. Why did God choose to reveal himself to Magi, who were undoubtedly astrologers? We know that the Old Testament ridicules astrologers and prohibits astrology. Isaiah 47:13-14 says, "Thou art wearied in the multitude of thy counsels. Let now the astrologers, the stargazers, the monthly prognosticators, stand up and save thee from these things that shall come upon thee. Behold, they shall be as stubble. The fire shall burn them. They shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame." If the Old Testament speaks of Magi and astrology in such a negative way, how are they presented positively in the New Testament, reading true signs in the heavens and even receiving special dreams from the Lord? Did God change? To solve this problem, we need to keep in mind that when the Magi visited Jesus, astronomy and astrology were still the same thing. The study of the stars was both a science and a way to seek divine signs. Therefore, the Magi who came from the East were not fortune-tellers or charlatans, like many Magi criticized in the Old Testament. These men were likely part of a group of sincere scholars who dedicated their lives to observing the heavens for significant signs. It is very likely that these Magi had some knowledge of the Old Testament. This makes sense because they possibly came from Babylon, where there had been a large Jewish community since the exile, with significant cultural and religious influence. Through this interaction, they could have learned about the prophecy of a great king who would be born in Israel. Thus, they were very different from the Magi criticized in the Old Testament, who generally sought to manipulate spiritual forces for personal gain or engaged in idolatry. The answer to the question, "Did God change?" is a confident no. God never changes. What changes in this case is the purpose and context. In the Bible, astrology and Magi are condemned because they were directly linked to pagan practices and the pursuit of personal power, leading people away from God. In this text, we see God using what these Magi knew, the stars, to guide them to the true Messiah. Furthermore, he gave them revelations and dreams, showing that he was leading their journey. This episode reveals God's sovereignty and grace, showing that he can use any means to reach sincere people, even those from different cultures and beliefs, to lead them to the truth. The focus is not on astrology, but on divine action, which transforms their knowledge into a bridge to encounter Jesus, the true King. Perhaps we've reached the most important question. What was this star? What did the Magi actually see? Before we explore the possibilities, if you want to study the scriptures, check out my mind maps of all the books of the Bible. This material is super complete and was developed to help you understand any book of the Bible quickly and practically. Want to transform your Bible study? The link to get your material is in the description. Well, there are several theories about what this star might have been. Johannes Kepler, a famous German astronomer, astrologer, and mathematician, believed that the star that guided the wise men could have been a natural astronomical phenomenon rather than a supernatural star. He proposed that the Star of Bethlehem was a rare conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation of Pisces, which occurred in 7 BC, catching the Magi's attention. Kepler also considered the possibility of a more complex celestial event, suggesting that the conjunction could have been accompanied by the appearance of a supernova. This phenomenon occurs when a star exhausts its fuel, collapses, and violently explodes, emitting intense light that can last for weeks or even months. However, this hypothesis remains speculation, as there are no historical records or concrete evidence confirming such an event at that time. Others suggest it could have been a comet, which some ancient authors called variable stars. A possible solution is found in verse 9. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them until it came, and stood over where the young child was. Based on this verse, we may believe that the star was entirely supernatural, Therefore, it might be a waste of time to make astronomical speculations. Understanding these mysteries is truly fascinating. However, the story of the Magi offers us something even more valuable, an example of spiritual diligence. They faced great difficulties, traveled long distances, and endured the challenges of ancient Eastern travel. Nothing made them give up. Their determination to find the King of the Jews is a testimony that when there is goodwill, the way opens. They did not rest until they saw Jesus, and that devotion should inspire us to do the same. Their journey challenges us to reflect. Are we willing to go as far as necessary, to sacrifice whatever it takes, to follow Christ with the same zeal? May we, like the Magi, seek Jesus' presence with all our hearts, not resting until we find him.